everybody. This is Paul Tuttle from Warwick. We still have people signing on right now, so we're going to wait for some additional folks to make the way through the registration process. And if anybody's having trouble hearing us, if we're not coming through clearly, if you want to just give us a quick chat to that effect in the lower right corner there, we'll just wait another minute or two to make sure everybody's connecting. And thank you for joining us. So hello again, everyone, and welcome to Warwick's presentation on backup and disaster recovery, protecting your organization. I'm Paul Tuttle, Senior Technology Consultant at Warwick, and I'm joined by Mike Johnson, our Chief Problem Solver.
Hello, everyone.
Mike, you want to just say a few words about your background and what you do for Warwick?
Sure, Paul. So I'm the title as the Chief Problem Solver. I kind of do a variety of things, mostly head up the data division. That can be anything from sales, product engineering, get into the weeds a little bit on the tech side, sales support, operational tasks, and a little bit of everything.
That's certainly true, Mike. For me, I am a Senior Technology Consultant, which basically means I look for partnerships with companies, school systems, nonprofit organizations to provide managed services, managed IT services for those organizations, and that's my role here. We still have some people jumping on to the webinar. While they're going through that process, I just want to say that the session today is going to run for about 45 minutes. We'll run through the presentation in about a half hour and want to leave plenty of time to address any questions that you have. I encourage you to use the chat feature that should be in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Don't hesitate to go ahead and give us questions as they come to mind. We may not address them right away, depending on if it applies to the flow of the presentation. We'll probably hold most of the questions till the end, but fear not, we will get back to you. I do want to mention that we've muted all the attendees, so you can holler all you want, but we can't hear you. So definitely use the chat feature if you want to communicate to us. It looks like most everybody is on board. We're going to go ahead and get started so that we can get through the presentation. So really the primary question is, why worry about a business continuity plan anyway? And for just about everyone, you've seen messages throughout the media concerning cyber attacks and breaches and a whole variety of business continuity issues that are taking a toll on not just individual businesses, but the entire U.S. economy. annual cost, depending on what source you're looking at, runs into the billions of dollars every year. And many of us as individual consumers have experienced a breach from a company that you may be a consumer. Certainly the Target breach affected many of us who have Target accounts. But where this affects business is many businesses are really underprepared or not prepared at all to deal with business continuity issues, whether it be from natural disaster or some kind of a hacking event. And the impact of these interruptions in operations are significant, and many companies never recover from those incidents. So while the media focus is on the big box stores and the big names like Sony, and there's been a lot of press around Netflix being infiltrated, our focus here is the impact on small to mid-sized businesses.
And to that point, Paul, it's if you think of yourself as an entrepreneur, as a business of one, business continuity. Have you lost a document recently, or had a file corruption somewhere? What is your individual business continuity plan? So people can relate to this conversation all the way down to themselves. So it's not just a small to medium to global business discussion. Depending on who you are and what you're doing, you can have your own business continuity plan or productivity continuity plan.
So you're saying it's analogous to like having a list of your credit card contacts in case you have a wallet stolen or something like that?
I think everyone can relate to it. An example would be if you have a pet and that pet has some kind of emergency, but you don't know where the pet's papers are, or where the local emergency vet is, or something like that. So people can relate to this on all levels.
That's true. So, Mike, I wonder if you could go into kind of the ranking for us of some of the most common interruptions from a frequency basis.
Yeah, so over the course of time, there's some that just kind of stand out, and they constantly make the top 5 or top 10 list. Some are obviously getting more prevalent in the cyber attacks, but the number one has still been power issues. While it seems like a pretty easy thing to remediate, put a UPS in, or have redundant power supplies, or have 2 different providers, if you are able to in your area, that could solve that problem. But it still remains the number one cause. And a lot of people, they have a power interruption and they have a hard shutdown of their protected systems or their non-protected systems, and a hard shutdown on a server could cause corruption, and then when the lights come back on, the application doesn't, or the system doesn't, and now you're in a disaster recovery scenario. Hardware and software failures are always in the top 5. The most common one that probably people, even at your workstation level, your laptop or whatever, would be a hard drive failure, or if it's in a server environment, it could be a controller failure or a backplane failure or something like that. Fairly common, especially on a personal level. So, laptops, most of them aren't ruggedized, so if you don't handle them with care, you could have a physical failure with them. And then on the software side, it's data corruption, file corruption. Obviously that's why Microsoft built in autosave features or recovery features in their Office suites, because how many times have you been working on a Word document, haven't saved it in an hour, and then all of a sudden it's having a problem, and you just lost an hour's worth of work, right? So it happens all the time. And, if Murphy's Law is in effect, that one file that you need. So CERN says that 1 out of every 15,000 files has corruption. And usually it's that file that you need in a time that you don't need to have that interruption.
That's right.
CyberTech, obviously that one's growing on the list, and expect to see that even more and more, maybe even come to the #1 on the list, especially with the release or the subscription-based service of hacking tools since those FBI tools got released. But no one's immune to it. 40% of all businesses had some kind of ransomware incident last year, and that the ransom payouts had a staggering $1 billion paid out. That's a heck of a business. Granted, it's illegal, but they're doing a good job, and it's definitely when your shared drive or all your files are become encrypted, that obviously can bring a business to its knees.
And Mike, isn't it true that the majority of people that do get hit with a ransomware incident, like a CryptoLocker or one of the others, Locky, isn't it true that most of them have to go ahead and just pay the ransom?
A lot of them do, and it's for reasons such as they haven't tested their backup plan, or they don't have one. The easiest way to avoid that scenario is obviously to have a disaster recovery plan in place and have it tested and make sure it's functional. The FBI always encourages don't do it, whatever you have to do. But sometimes people will catch it before the ransom starts to increase, within 24 hours. So it's easy for them to, shell out $500, get the encryption key back, and then start decrypting it in lieu of, trying to recreate data because they don't have a backup.
It's really all about assessing the amount of the ransom against the cost of being down, not having access to your files for a day, 2 days, a week, and the math is pretty simple.
Right, yeah, so let's say you do have a backup strategy in place, but your intervals aren't correct, right? Or maybe you haven't tested your backup, and let's say your last good backup was 2 weeks ago, or maybe a month ago or something. Then you start to evaluate that, right? Is the cost of the ransom versus going back to 30 days or losing 30 days of data or work or whatever? What's that value there? And does it make sense just to pay $500 or $1,000 to get it back to yesterday versus 30 days ago? But the ransom people have gotten smart about it. Instead of asking for $1,500 or $15,000 up front, they give it to you in little bite-sized pieces so you can sit and think about it. But it's definitely a problem. Phishing campaigns are the same way. That's a lot of the ways that the ransomware gets started, and we've seen that in all levels of business and public and private sector type stuff.
Okay. And one final question that I had on that, Mike, from what I'm reading and hearing in different sources is that two things. One, there's no guarantee that even if you do pay the ransom that you won't get hit again, or that if you pay the ransom that the access to your data will be restored.
No, well, they've gotten pretty good about it because it's a business for them now. That's how they made $1 billion last year. So they're pretty good about giving you the key back, but it's something you want to avoid usually at all costs. Some more disruptions are usually human error. Human error is always in the top 5. Whether you accidentally deleted something, you clicked on a ransomware or some link, caused an infection, or maybe it's you inadvertently pulled the plug on a business critical system. Maybe the cleaning crew knocked the cable out or something like that, and that caused some downtime. And then, of course, you can't get away from climate-related issues, hurricanes, floods. You chose to put your equipment in a utility closet, and the water supply line is above your equipment. We've seen it all.
Oh yeah, not a good situation. And I know in my case, I've had at least a couple of clients, one a private school and another actually a small municipal police department. Their systems were hit by lightning and basically took them out of business. In the case of the police department, they lost the ability to, their emergency call boxes were taken completely out of operation, and the school system was hit very hard by the results of having their systems fried. So lightning strikes are things that I know in my own experience with clients are a significant issue. So there's some other consequences of attempting to operate without a business continuity plan. You've got increased expenses, decreased revenues through inability to do transactions, brand damage, basically your reputation that you've taken such efforts to develop can take a serious hit if you don't have a business continuity plan in place. And eventually it's going to lead to a loss of customers.
Warren says it pretty clearly here. It takes a long time to build your business, build your reputation. But again, if you can't service your customers or provide the level of service that you're known for, people forget about that reputation pretty quick when it starts to impact their business.
So I guess the rest of this session is, so now that we recognize that the stakes are high and there's a lot of different ways that our business operations can be interrupted or shut down completely, what do we do about it? What are the options, and are they accessible? Are they affordable? What's a roadmap for starting to mitigate the risks associated with business continuity? So, Mike, maybe you could give us a quick rundown of some of the key components of a good business continuity plan.
Sure. One of the things, in my opinion, or in our opinion, is key is stakeholder support or, upper-level buy-in. We come across this a lot, even if you're just pitching disaster recovery plan or business continuity, sometimes it can be fairly expensive. And if you don't get buy-in from the people that are making those decisions, it's going to be an uphill battle all the way. So that's one of the keys, getting stakeholder support from the beginning and make sure that everyone understands the value and the critical nature of it. Secondly, you'd want to develop a communication plan. We have interdepartmental communication plan here, so within your organization, make sure that you have stakeholders in each department and they're leading they're representing their department in the overall conversation and planning for continuity. And then we also, you want to have an external communication plan as well. We didn't list that here, but we'll talk about it at point number 5. Then have your technology and your technology execution plan. So it's one thing and this is kind of where we fit in, is the technology component of it. What are the best current solutions out there that make sense for both the business and the provider and the management team? And then also the execution plan. Just because you have the technology in place, that's just one component of it. Executing on that plan in the critical time in your recovery period is only as good as, as many times as you test it or practice that plan. So, like I said, you might have your data backed up, but you may not know how to restore it or get into a recovery state, and that obviously negates the whole whole idea of it. One thing that's pretty common that we see is, it's kind of set it and forget it. People will put a backup in place, whether it's, a local backup, a direct-to-cloud backup, or something, and they'll check in and see that their files have a green light, or they'll get an email from a backup provider and say, yep, it was successful, and that's enough for them. But this industry changes, and there's new technologies that come out, more efficient technologies that allow for faster restoration times. And there's also new risks that come out there. Obviously, the cyber attack stuff is newer, especially at the volume. So you want to keep track of the trends in the industry that are occurring. Having a social media plan is kind of a newer thing, and this deals directly with, when you have a disaster, protecting your reputation. And having a social media plan is not just having a LinkedIn account or a Twitter account or something like that. It's having someone that has some expertise in it. And typically, you don't find a CTO or IT director or an admin being a social media expert. So you're going to want to keep that in mind when you're developing your plan. Involve the marketing team if you have that expertise on that team, or maybe reach out to someone so that you can communicate with your customers and respond to them, if you're having a crisis, so you can maintain your reputation and keep everyone on the same page. And then finally, obviously, testing and training schedules. You want to test your whole plan, and obviously the plan is not just limited to the backup and restoration. It's the communication plan. It's, if it's a bigger disaster, it's where do you relocate employees, that kind of stuff. And then the training schedules, obviously, if something like security training or phishing training is part of your risk management plan, which would be part of your continuity plan, obviously have those training schedules in place as well.
That's great, Mike. So we've got about 8 or 10 more minutes before we turn it over to questions, and I do appreciate the questions that are coming in, and we will get to those shortly. And also specifically, one of our participants asked whether the slides from this presentation will be available. The answer is we will make available a link to this session that will give you access to the whole presentation for today's event.
So specifically, let's take a look at the technology plan, which is one piece of the overall continuity plan. And there's, like I said, it's not just technology. It's not just your backup application. While that is part of it, and what you want to look for now is we typically do a hybrid solution now, where you have a local copy of either your data or your protected systems, and then that information is also replicated into the cloud, and obviously it would be encrypted in transit and at rest. Why do we want, Paul, you know why we want to do a hybrid type solution?
No, but I hope you can tell me, Mike.
Well, you always want a local copy because it's the fastest way to recover. So whether you're doing an image-based backup or just a file-based backup, it's always going to be faster to recover that data locally. And then obviously you want to have an off-site copy in case something happens to the local environment. So when you do that, you want to, like I said, you want to have nowadays look for image-based backups that are chain-free, so you don't have to consolidate all the chains of the incremental backups in order to recover a certain data set or stand up a virtual environment.
I'm glad you touched on that, Mike, because one of the questions that I was going to address later, but since it fell right into the presentation, we've gotten a question, hey, if I have a valid cloud-based backup and business continuity solution established, can I eliminate totally the local backup?
You can. You just got to make sure that your recovery time objective can be met based on pulling all that data down from the cloud. Most of the time you can if you have a large data set or large image-based protected system, that's not going to be an option unless you can spend 2 or 3 days being down.
Just real quick, because I know we're going to run out of time here fairly soon. Maybe you could just real quickly make the distinction for our attendees between a recovery point objective and a recovery time objective, which are terms that are commonly thrown around with business continuity.
Yeah, so recovery time objective is, what is your tolerance for being down from a time? Is it 4 hours? Is it 2 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours? How long can you go without servicing your customers or producing your product, or whatever it may be? The recovery point objective is how far back from a systems standpoint is tolerable. So is it a day? So if we meet our RTO of 4 hours, is that back to yesterday's data, or is it back to 2 days ago data? So whenever you're figuring that out, you're going to have to put in perspective how far back, how much time you're going to lose in data.
And again, the math applies. You have to do your own math to figure out just how much damage that's going to do to your business operation based on how long you can afford to be down.
Everyone's different. We had one customer that we tried to get them on a disaster recovery plan. And they said, we can be offline for 2 or 3 days, so we're not too concerned about it. That's rare, but other people it's 2 hours or 4 hours or 8 hours.
Right. We've had clients in regulatory environments that do financial transactions, trading, and so forth, where if you were down for that length of time, they'd virtually be out of business.
Right.
So it really does depend on each organization's circumstances, regulatory environments, and so forth.
Yeah, and another part of that technology solution is the emergency in-cloud virtualization. So if you're doing the image-based backup, which is basically a picture of the protected machine at a point in time, if something happens to our facility, can we bring up that machine in a cloud-based environment and then create a VPN back to our network so that it basically looks seamless to the users. And then a nice little feature of most of the solutions today is an automated screenshot verification, which is basically the system, the backup system will spin up these images and check them to make sure, and you'll get a screenshot that you'll see, hey, this server came up to a login screen, and that usually indicates that it had a successful boot. Some other things that are often overlooked are environmental things, power sources. Do you have clean power? Are you in an area that has a lot of power problems? If you are, what are you going to do to mitigate those? Generation power, and you have a UPS to bridge that gap between when you're going from utility power to generated power. Cooling sources, so making sure your environment is regulated, that you have your protected systems in.
Right, so it's all about having decent HVAC, and we certainly run into clients where when they talk about a server closet, it's literally a server closet.
Right, and and they make cheap devices, network-based devices that are environmental devices, so they'll detect humidity, temperature, and they'll alert you in real time.
And isn't that true, Mike, that most of our clients, we urge them to have as a part of our remote monitoring of all their systems, those kind of climate controls?
Correct.
Very good. We've got about a few minutes here before we want to move into questions and answers, but so we'll just kind of go lightly over these other issues.
And then same thing with power goes connectivity. More and more people have this problem. You may be in an industrial area, but maybe Spectrum doesn't want to go down your road or something. So you may be limited with your options as far as connectivity goes, or how reliable it is. So if you don't have a reliable primary connection, you may want to look to have a redundant connection, especially if you're leveraging a lot of cloud-based applications. And also, you're going to want whatever provider you choose, make sure you know their SLAs, and then also monitor that connection, because you may have a real fast connection, but it may be running at 80 or 90%, in which case that could potentially cause a problem, or maybe it's causing some productivity issues. And then the last one typically is security, the usual AV, antivirus, and patch management policies, perimeter security. When I say that, I mean firewall, perimeter of your network. Obviously want to maintain that. And then physical security, lock the server room or the closets that have your IDF and your MDF, anywhere that your network-based equipment is residing. And then finally, your execution plan is critical too. So now you have all the components in place. You want to have your execution plan, and you want to identify and prioritize your protected systems and whatever data that those may have. And those, obviously your business critical systems are prioritized higher than, maybe have some secondary application server or something. Define your RTO and your RPOs, and then make sure that when you're looking at your protected systems, kind of tier them, because you're going to need, when you bring back that environment, whether it's the one system or the entire environment, you're going to have dependencies. Systems are going to depend on each other typically. So make sure you understand what those dependencies are, and then the business critical systems. So, and then obviously the secondary and tertiary. The way we like to look at it is, when you're in a recovery situation, you're laying, so you got knocked down, you're laying on your face.
It's like triage.
Yeah. So you get on your hands and knees first, right? You start to crawl. So you've established you've stood up your system dependencies. And then when you get your business critical systems up, you're starting to walk. And then when you get the whole environment up, you're back up to running and servicing your clients like you were before the disaster. And then obviously you want to make sure you go through that cycle when it's not an emergency, just to make sure you are as efficient as possible in meeting your RTO and RPOs. And a lot of companies now are, just like they're doing with everything else, they're gamifying it so that...
That's a word?
Yeah.
You sure, Mike?
I just made it up. That way it becomes more interesting for the participants that are involved in it, instead of them carving out a couple hours a month as, this chore that I don't want to do. It becomes, all right, this fun little game that we're also doing something protective of the organization.
That's great. So really just to kind of have a quick summary, the small and mid-sized businesses are increasingly vulnerable to the various issues that we've discussed, whether it be from, hackers from the outside or natural disasters to user issues. One of the sources that I looked at that's kind of going around is that there's always there's one person in your company that'll click on anything. And I think that's probably true. So, user issues are certainly a big part of what you want to mitigate with your business continuity plan. There's solutions out there. The cloud solutions that you can use to make your organization safe, or at least to mitigate the damage from some of these threats, are available, and it is something that's available to you through an expert provider, which in this case means Mike. So definitely encourage, whether it's with Warwick or someone else, engage those outside resources and make sure that your organization is fully protected. And we certainly provide this for our clients. I won't make a big commercial out of this, but it is an important part of our comprehensive IT services for our clients to make sure that they are protected, that they're not vulnerable. More and more we see clients that have chief compliance officers that have specific programs set up within their company, either because they are within a regulated industry or they simply have feel like it's a part of their fiduciary responsibility to their owners, to their shareholders, to make sure that they've done the work to map out a plan, execute it, and document it. And as Mike said, to train it as well.
Yeah, and we're seeing more and more insurance companies now mandating that in order to get a cybersecurity policy, you need to have a functional business continuity plan and evidence of that. So it is critical, and it's becoming, something that while people don't necessarily want to acknowledge it until they've had a problem, it's definitely a conversation that needs to be occurring in every organization.
That's great. So we've come to the end of the presentation. Be happy to answer questions. We've got a couple in already. Again, in answer to Gary's question earlier, we will follow up with an email that will give you a link to a recording of this presentation. So we'll make all of that available to you. So you'll be able to see the slides and hear the commentary as well. One question that came up during the session, and Mike, I might ask you to address this, it's about encryption. And the question is, can we assume that data backups to the cloud are encrypted? And what about cloud-based email solutions? Is it safe to assume that email is encrypted, or is that something that we have to ask for as some kind of special arrangement?
Yeah, generally speaking, email will not be encrypted unless you are using some kind of encryption add-on.
And is that true for our most cloud backup solutions? That data is going to be encrypted.
Absolutely, yeah. And you want to verify that. I don't know of any that are not. I'm sure there probably might be some out there if they're still in business. But, yeah, generally speaking, it's encrypted in transit and at rest with usually AES 256 or something. And then now it's getting even more popular to have that resting data stay within your country. So, back in the early days of it, they were putting data centers up all across the world, and your data, when it goes to your cloud, your hosting provider, they may spread it across their data centers. But now there's a huge push and some of it's compliance or regulatory requirements. Others is just secure mine. If I back up my data, I want to store it in the U.S. I don't want to store it in Russia.
Right, right. The one other question that's come up for Mike, the online storage and file sharing, like a Dropbox or Google, can you say a little bit about what it means for my organization to just use one of those versus maybe something a little bit more secure?
Sure. You got to look at what your needs are and if they satisfy your needs. They got real popular starting in the consumer sector, like Dropbox did, and then they came in with a business product. And you have others that just started in the enterprise space, and they have a lot more security features, they have a lot more controls, and that not only user controls, but in how you would share out that data within your organization, but also some other controls. So, yeah, it basically, it has to fit your business and fit your need, and not every product does that, especially ones that you're familiar with in the consumer space.
That's great. So we have a few more minutes. Again, if anyone has any questions for Mike or Paul, please go ahead and chat those out to us. One person asked, what is the typical ransom if you do get hit by ransomware like CryptoLocker or Locky? Is there kind of an average or typical experience that you might have to pay? I just wondered if you had heard, Mike, any specific data on that.
What I've come across in experience and in reading, they're usually lower numbers, but they increase over time, right? So it's a low number, $500 to $1,000 to begin with, first 24 hours or 48 hours, then it goes up and up and up. I don't know how, if they did encrypt your data, how they would value it. Otherwise, and like I said before, the problem that they got greedy in the beginning, right? They were just asking for large sums, and they weren't getting the payments like they are now. And of course, the good thing, I guess, if you want to pay ransoms and you invested in Bitcoin, which is the only way to pay ransoms early on, you probably have some money to burn, right? Because Bitcoin reached an all-time high, or is flirting with it again at around 4,000. So if that's the way you want to go, then so be it. But it's obviously not the right way to go.
I hear you. So those are the questions that we received so far. We've got a couple more minutes if there are anyone out there that has any questions to add before we wrap it up. In the meantime, let me say that Warwick will certainly offer an assessment of your IT infrastructure. If anyone is interested in having an assessment of your network infrastructure, and we'd certainly be happy to work with you and set up a time to run a scan and develop a report that gives essentially the health of your network and any vulnerabilities that may be out there that you might not have discovered on your own. The contact information is available there. We will be following up to give all participants, again, the link from today's presentation along with our contact information. Any final questions? If not, I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and safe computing to everyone. Any final word from you, Mike?
No, thank you for joining, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all.